Ramallah, Palestinian territories, September 2025. Diplomatic shockwaves are reverberating through the Middle East and across European capitals as a coalition of 10 countries prepares to formally recognize the state of Palestine. The decision, expected to be announced in New York on Monday during the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly, marks a potentially historic turning point in the decades-long conflict. The announcement, however, is already triggering fierce reactions in Israel, where officials are warning of consequences that could reshape the political and territorial landscape of the region. The move comes after months of quiet diplomatic coordination, primarily spearheaded by European allies, but stretching as far as Australia and Canada. According to an advisor to French President Emmanuel Macron, the countries set to endorse Palestinian statehood are France, Andorra, Australia, Belgium, Canada, Luxembourg, Portugal, Malta, the United Kingdom, and San Marino. The French presidency confirmed the plan late Friday, with officials clarifying that the recognition is intended as a peace-driven gesture, not an act of provocation. The Élysée Palace underlined that it was part of a collective diplomatic effort designed to breathe new life into a peace process stalled for years. Yet, the political timing, coinciding with the continuing war in Gaza following Hamas's October 7th, 2023 attacks, has drawn criticism in Jerusalem. Israel views the recognition not as a step toward peace, but as a dangerous precedent that legitimizes militant violence. From the Israeli government, the tone has been defiant and uncompromising. Defense Minister Israel Katz issued one of the strongest responses yet, warning that recognition would be met with tangible action on the ground. Israel Katz said, "This is a decisive response to the terrorist organizations that are trying to harm and weaken our hold on this land, and it is also a clear message to French President Emmanuel Macron and his associates. They will recognize a Palestinian state on paper, but we will build the Jewish-Israeli state here on the ground." This statement encapsulated Israel's dual strategy: reject international recognition while reinforcing settlements and sovereignty claims over the occupied West Bank. Officials close to Katz signaled that annexation of large swathes of the West Bank is under active consideration if the recognition process proceeds. The Israeli Foreign Ministry added that recognition would reward Hamas and weaken the fragile security balance in Gaza and the West Bank. The French government, aware of the risks, has been careful to stress its position. Paris insists the recognition is not meant as a confrontation, but as an urgent step for peace. A senior Élysée official reiterated, "This is not a program of reprisals nor counter-reprisals. It is an effort for peace." However, the same official delivered a warning of their own. The annexation of the West Bank is a clear red line and evidently the worst possible violation of United Nations resolutions. This stark phrasing underscored France's concern that Israeli threats of annexation could unravel international law and ignite new waves of conflict. The announcement is expected to take place in New York, outside the main UN General Assembly proceedings, but with symbolic weight. Diplomats familiar with the planning said that the venue was chosen deliberately to send a message. The recognition may not yet be part of the UN's official agenda, but it reflects the mood of many states frustrated with the impasse. In Ramallah, officials welcomed the move as overdue. Palestinian representatives argued that recognition strengthens their position internationally, especially as their communities continue to endure the ongoing war in Gaza and the tightening grip of Israeli settlement expansion. Katz's remarks highlighted Israel's determination to turn international condemnation into domestic resolve. The defense minister linked the recognition issue directly to the country's long-term settlement strategy. By stating that recognition would remain on paper, Katz underscored Israel's intent to make its sovereignty indisputable through physical presence, settlements, military posts, and infrastructure projects that extend deeper into Palestinian territory. In Jerusalem, the government line remains consistent. Palestinian statehood can only emerge through direct negotiations, not unilateral recognition. But critics note that Israel has systematically weakened those negotiations by expanding settlements and rejecting international mediation. Behind the diplomatic maneuvering looms the Gaza conflict, now approaching its second year. Since Hamas's surprise attack on Israeli territory on October 7th, 2023, Israel's military response has left tens of thousands dead, deepened humanitarian crises, and fractured international opinion. For many of the 10 countries, the war has become a tipping point. Recognizing a Palestinian state, they argue, is not about rewarding Hamas, but about acknowledging the right of Palestinians to sovereignty, independent of militant groups. Canada, for instance, has framed the recognition as part of a balanced approach that supports Israel's security while affirming Palestinian rights. The UK government, under mounting domestic pressure, emphasised that it seeks to create conditions for a two-state solution. While Europe has long been divided over how to handle Palestinian recognition, this coalition signals a shift. Previously, countries such as France and the UK hesitated, citing fears of undermining peace talks. Now, spurred by public pressure and the Gaza war, they appear more willing to take the political risk. Belgium and Luxembourg have been among the most consistent advocates within the EU for Palestinian recognition. Their participation reflects a continuity of policy rather than a new turn. France's decision, however, carries outsized weight. As a permanent member of the UN Security Council and a nation with deep Middle Eastern ties, Paris's support lends the recognition movement international legitimacy. Diplomatic analysts warn that the recognition could trigger a domino effect. Other countries, particularly in Latin America and parts of Asia, may follow suit, further isolating Israel diplomatically. But the backlash could be equally powerful. Israeli annexation of West Bank territories would not only end prospects for a two-state solution, but also place Israel in direct violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. A former UN envoy described the situation as a high-stakes gamble, noting that both sides are hardening their positions instead of moving toward dialogue. The symbolic presence of the UN in this story cannot be overlooked. Scenes of the UN headquarters in New York serve as a backdrop for what could be the most significant shift in Palestinian diplomacy since the Oslo Accords. For the Palestinian Authority, the recognition bolsters its claim to legitimate statehood within the UN system. For Israel, however, it represents an erosion of its international standing and a challenge to its narrative of security and legitimacy. Monday's announcement will likely not end the debate, but intensify it. Israel's threats of annexation will test the resolve of France and its allies. The Palestinians, meanwhile, may see recognition as symbolic rather than practical, unless it is followed by material support and binding commitments. Diplomatic experts suggest that the next steps will determine whether this recognition marks a true shift toward peace or becomes another moment of international theatre. One senior analyst summarized the dilemma. Recognition alone cannot create a Palestinian state, but annexation can certainly destroy the possibility of one. As the world waits for Monday's announcement in New York, the stage is set for a dramatic clash between symbolism and power politics. 10 countries are prepared to recognize a Palestinian state, and in doing so, they are challenging decades of geopolitical inertia. Israel, however, is prepared to respond forcefully, making clear that its actions on the ground will outweigh words on paper. Israel Katz said, "They will recognize a Palestinian state on paper, but we will build the Jewish-Israeli state here on the ground." That line may prove to be the defining tension of the coming days: recognition versus annexation, diplomacy versus force, the future of Palestine versus the reality of Israel's territorial grip.